next panel that we have is to talk just about that. So talk about all the technology trends in 2025 that you should look out to. To moderate this session, I'd like to invite Anand Lakshman, VP Product at Razorpay, and I have a marquee panel to kind of lead this. Firstly, I'd like to invite Mahesh Ramamoorthy, sir, CIO, Yes Bank. Anyway, sir. Yeah. Navin Doshi, Director of Engineering, GPay. And Saurabh Arora, co-founder and CTO at Plum. Put your hands together for this panel, folks, and also put your phones on silence. I am excited for this session. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, Chetty. Really appreciate that. And thank you to all the panelists for being here. So in this session, what we hope to achieve is we will talk about, of course, the latest tech trends. All of you talked about AI, but there's a lot beyond AI. And we are here to sort of talk through what else is there. We will talk about rapid innovation in many of your industries. We have a very esteemed panel from across different industries, so we'll talk about innovation in your particular industries. And the more important thing is, as AI ramps up, as data becomes a lot more available, what is also happening is that you need to build guardrails around this. What is the right guardrailing that needs to happen around all of this is something that we want to discuss. And the last thing is probably that India has been in the forefront of innovation, especially on payments, but there is also a lot happening globally. Would love to hear your thoughts on what else is happening around the world. With that, we'll start with the first question to Mahesh. So Mahesh, you work in a finance-first industry, and you are the CIO at Yes Bank. The elephant in the room, everyone is sort of referred to as AI. Now, there is intense debate in the ecosystem today on whether India should be investing on building our own LLM models, or should India focus on building apps on top of base LLM models that exist in the industry today. What are your sort of thoughts on that?
Anand, I think, thank you for having me over here, really appreciate it. I think you've touched upon one of the most critical questions. There is, and what I express is my personal view basis what I've seen across. First and foremost, I think today, a lot of what you build, an LLM, let's understand how you build it, right? If you were to build, first and foremost, you need the logic of how you want to build. What you want to build, no doubt, can be done. But at the end of the day, when you build an LLM, what's most important is how well you train that LLM to give you the right responses, the right I would say answers to it, to your prompts. I think that is where the challenge really comes in, because at the end of at the base of everything is data. And any individual institutions, let's take a financial institution that we are in, have limited amount of data, which is essentially their data. They really don't understand data beyond themselves. Because today we are a regulated entity. As regulated entities, we are hugely, I think, aligned to compliance expectations, which means that our ability to seek data beyond what we have or beyond the credit bureaus are essentially consent-based. Even the credit bureaus are consent-based approach. So for us, I think the way I would look at it is, ideally, in a place like India, which has vast amounts of data and where you have a huge amount of digital adoptions and everything, I would call out a public-private kind of a partnership or a regulator, a triaging. I would call it a triage. A triage means there is a regulator, there is private entities, financial institutions, all of that, and there are tech companies who can come to the play. So to me, I think that triage, there has to be an entity set up. That's the way I look at it, where a lot of information can be shared anonymously or with the right levels of data protection to that entity. That entity can build a credible database beyond what we see today in the credit bureaus and everything. Once you do that, once the data is available and the data is getting, I would say, rightly populated, the structure is available, the training comes in well, your ability, then each of the front end, which is where I would call it the banks or financial institutions or insurance industries, every other industry, in my view, will be able to write their models on top to be able to extract and use that information meaningfully. So to me, the answer is not about just building an LLM. I think we have enough and more tech talent and the tech powerhouse that we have. The competency exists, but giving the right responses, building out the right view, and making it unbiased due by the right levels of training needs a much more larger partnerships. So I think the way I would respond to it is twofold. One, such things required a fair bit of regulatory, I would say, oversight, framework, I would put it. That framework essentially is a public-private partnerships, which essentially is building a lot of the data from various different touch points. The usage of that can be fairly consent-based, which essentially is then consumed by the front end, which is right you said, the applications or various, where the right levels of models for usage can be built in. And then that can be used for your use cases. The use cases could be plenty. Right from the customer experience side to risk management side to product pricing, decision making, a lot of areas. So to me, I think that's how it should play. The right answer cannot be that every bank or every financial institution puts money in it. There's going to be a cost to it. There is going to be flavors of bias to it, which is not because it's not complete data. And it could create non-explainable situations for regulated entities, which could create brand issues over time. I think we have to be careful. So to me, I think I would play a fairly different role here and seek that kind of an intervention to be able to. And as a country, we need to have our own LLM, our own data mart, which essentially can be then used so that it is our sovereign property rather than looking at it from third parties. I think that's the way I would look at it.
No, that's a very it's a fascinating way of looking at it. I do have one quick follow-up on this, right? Do you think we are headed in that direction? Are there efforts that are sort of going in that direction? Or is this something that you think it's out there in the future?
From what I'm seeing in the news and what my interactions with a few of the regulators, I do see initial steps coming out. Yeah. But a lot of the focus is around building infrastructure. Now, you recently seen announcements of building infrastructure. But I too believe that it is not going to be far because there are going to be stumbling blocks learnings where the regulators, SEBI, IRDA, or for that matter, your RBI, everyone coming together to say, how do we really build this together? So in the next 12, 18 months, I can see some significant call-outs coming here. And building on top, how do we do it? Like I can just take a quick thinking right now is, can a credit bureau who's used in the banking side, they have enough and more data, but on one side of the story. Yeah. Could they be expanding their portfolio? Because they're also regulated by, say, the RBIs in some form. So can they be used expanding their business portfolio with the different partnerships? So I do believe models will emerge. For sure, business models will emerge and regulations will come through. We are not going to be far behind on that. But that frameworks, regulations means frameworks, can be used, distilled to create such entities. And that's going to be the success for failure, a success for go forward. I don't think we should rely extensively on outside of India. We should build our own.
No, that's a
I
great
think the
time. Thank you for sharing
sovereignty
that
of our
point.
data is most important for us.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that point of view. It was very clear. Navin, I do want to ask something about, because you're at Google, and I think it has been the center of innovation for a very, very long time, and GPay has played a big role in development of payments in India. Now, the question is, you're also seeing data. You're seeing ML models sort of explode. And you're building GPay, and you're seeing data explode, ML explode. What trends are contributing to how GPay is working with all of this amalgamation of data plus ML models coming together? What is happening in this ecosystem?
So first of all, thanks, Anand, and great to be part of this esteemed panel. No, I think you touched upon a very critical area. Like, if you look at it, right, the generative AI, LLM, and has been leapfrogging every day right now. The pace at which it is growing is hard to, like we are limited by our imagination in terms of what we can do with it, right? So I'll bring like couple of trends which we are very actively looking at, and in the fintech industry it is going in terms of payments. So one is like while some of the LLM models have accelerated a lot of things which were going at a very slow pace in the past, right? So one particular area is how do we make our users make sense out of their financial data, which is today scattered into multiple places, right, if you look at it. And then understand it in a way which is easy for them and kind of make a more well-informed decision. To me, that's a very critical area. And for example, one of the things generative AI can very well do is it can assimilate data from different sources, individual data, as well as what is publicly available in terms of various financial products, and help a user to understand well in terms of, okay, what is a comparison of these products, right? It can summarize them. Today, this information is all kind of in various documents, which is kind of very hard for a user to understand in terms of like it is in agreement documents or policy documents, which is very hard for any user to understand. And also ask very pointed questions, which is very relevant for them in terms of, okay, if I want to do this, how is it, right? I'll give you an example. Like say today, if you want to take a loan, right? There are certainly few basic things like interest, tenure, everything. But if you look at the policy documents, they're fairly obscure and hard for any user to understand in terms of what is the prepayment policies, what are the repayment things change, right? If I miss a kind of EMI, and all that become very critical, right? So generative AI can kind of help a user to understand some of these well. In Google, in GPay especially, for the loan part, we have developed a chat-based assistant which can answer some of the very pointed questions for users like, okay, how are my repayment going to change if I change my tenure or EMI? And those kind of questions are very relevant and easy for user to understand and make sense out of it. So that's one area, right? The second area I would cover is like in payment, I think trust and safety is very critical. And that's the area where I think the new advances and the advanced AI models can help us to make it very safe and secure for everybody. And I think what is going to fundamentally change is I think they will become more proactive. We are going to become more proactive about detecting fraud from different sources, because now we are living in a world of multimodal models, which are going to consume different forms of data from different signals and being able to process at a very fast stage, right? So what is critical is can you provide the right risk and safety features to a user at the right time and the right place in the product. Like, for example, if you look at Google Pay today, just before you are entering a PIN, it will actually warn, and it kind of goes through advanced ML models in the back end in terms of what's the latest threats, scenarios, and everything, and it will warn the user, okay, you are going to make a payment which is insecure. And this is the right point, right? You can't really, you can tell them, educate them, but still they'll miss, right, in the realm of the things, right? So that's one example of how we can do. Another example, right, again, this is a very hypothetical situation I'm talking about, is let's say a user has been socially schemed, right, in terms of people call them and trying to do. What if, in a privacy-preserving way, the phone can listen to that conversation and then the interactions and tell the user that, oh, you are being schemed now, right now. I think these are the real-time advanced technologies which we can bring now with the power of LLM and AI.
Fantastic.
Right?
No,
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
these are some of the examples, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Navin. I actually want to sort of bounce off that, right, and probably bring Saurabh into the picture here. Saurabh, you are on at Plum Insurance. You are at the core of medical insurance, right? And data, and we'll stick to the theme of data again, right? Because data, as you look at one of your critical parts of your business is the claims and adjudication sort of the business. And the payouts that you have and actually determining if it's the right claim, etc., that forms the central linchpin around which your business sort of revolves, right? How do you think data sort of playing a role there? Is your claims and adjudication process actually changing because you have access to larger sets of data? Are insurance premiums going to go down? Do you see that happening? how do you think, because as risk models evolve, right, you're probably able to personalize for that individual and say, hey, I can do a lot better and I can accurately predict what should be the premium I'll charge you. Do you see that trend sort of playing out?
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Anand, for having me over. Insurance premium should not go down, it should go up. We are
Sorry guys, bad news.
We are a country which is already 100 times lesser expensive as compared to an American health system. And we have to look out for medical inflation, etc. But there is, instead of cost of savings, we should talk about the accuracies and the transparency and hurdles of what people go through when it comes to claims. It's a very trust deficit industry. It needs to become more transparent. It needs to become more fast. I can tell you what's happening, what we are seeing. So if you look at claims adjudication process, there are three critical points in claims adjudication. One is, how do you prepare a document which you have to send for reimbursement? You know, if you have gone through any sort of hospitalization, you would know these document preparation is a task of its own. There is medical discharge summaries, there are doctors' diagnosis, diagnostic reports which is corroborating the diagnosis, there are prescriptions and treatment summaries which corroborates what treatment on what diagnosis, bills and receipts to tally as well. So there is a lot of document overload when it comes. Second critical point in claims adjudication process is medico legal sort of admissibility, which is that if this is a this is a diagnosis and this is a treatment, is this the right treatment to that diagnosis? And this is done by a team of doctors today. The third is, if it is admissible, basis on the terms and conditions of a policy, what line items are reimbursed and what line items are not reimbursed, right? So it's a quite a lengthy process in reimbursements of claims today. Traditionally, the adjudication, especially from a document deficiencies, is built on OCR. These documents could be, and today, especially in India, we are early in our journey of digitization of documents, especially when it comes to healthcare. So you would have tier 2 towns, hospitals writing in hand. So there's a lot of handwritten prescriptions, discharge summaries still done by the doctors. The names could be mismatched, whether the patient name is misunderstood by OCRs with a doctor name. The bills of line items could have wrong interpretation of what is their bills and what are the receipts and what are those amounts. What we have seen is, and when you build on these OCR tech, these are rule-based engines. They become very brittle over a time. Any sort of changes, unseen, structured of receipts, bills, discharge summaries, there are infinite ways to represent them. They all make these systems very collapsible. And what happens is that most of the claims go to human adjudication and the machines are not able to do the job. In the last couple of years, we have seen LLMs especially taking up a lot of OCR load. We are seeing when LLMs have an understanding model, which means that you don't have to write regex rules and very brittle codes of lakhs of lines of systems which are not scaling. Instead, you could do a natural language-based rules. You could say, if the name, first name and the last name partially match, or interpret that Anand Kumar is also A Kumar. Figure out who is the doctor in the prescription summary. Identify what is the diagnosis happening. Corroborate that with a treatment which is happening. So there is what we are seeing is complete collapse of what we have done with OCR so far, and then rebuild much simpler, much scalable systems where rules are now natural language. So this is one example of what's happening at the adjudication for document deficiencies.
So I just want to follow up on that. I know you have probably other examples to give.
Yeah, this is
but
one more
on
example.
that specific example, right, when you say LLMs, right, and when you, is it that you're borrowing the base LLMs, going back to his question, right, and then you're building applications on top? Is that how you're viewing it? And this is going to replicate itself across multiple industries, right? I mean, yours is one industry. The application layer is coming out very strong. Have you ever felt the need to sort of go beyond building applications layers on top of LLMs?
I was just about to get into the limitation of that now, which is the medical legal admissibility. Here, I'll give you an example, and I've seen this happening last week in my company. By the way, Plum is an employee health insurance and a healthcare company, and we obsess over claims. We have a really high industry high claims NPS. And we have an LLM today which is answering to people whether is a treatment covered or not. So before you walk into your treatment, you could have a chat with the LLM, and we can look at your policy terms and condition and tell you whether a treatment is covered or not. So there's a person who comes in and he says, I want to get through a hydrocele surgery. Is this covered or not? The LLM looks into the daycare list and identify there is a hydrocele surgery which is admissible and responds back to the customer saying, yes, it is covered, you can go ahead for the treatment. The person goes ahead for the treatment, gets the bills, etc., and it gets rejected because hydrocele surgery depends on the congenital condition, whether it is a birth defect or not, and there is a policy terms and condition which says the extra congenital disease is not covered in your policy. Now here we need a medical grade LLM, which is built on top of the base, but is built specially for medical understanding, where it could ask a follow-up question to the user. You're going for a hydrocele surgery, but is this a birth defect? All it needed to ask was, corroborate that with an extra congenital.
Do you see this sort of play out in other industries? It's a very fascinating example, what you've given, right?
Yeah.
We don't need general purpose LLMs. We are now starting to need special purpose LLMs.
Absolutely.
Do you think that's a trend? Do you think that different industries will start to need special purpose LLMs?
Yeah.
And I sort of loosely called it as an app layer, but what you've brought to light is that it's not just the app layer, we almost need a special purpose LLM.
Wherever you see a subject matter expert, where these are the places where we'll go special grade LLMs. For non-subject matter experts, I think the base LLMs will do great.
Got it, got it. Sorry, are you at a liberty to disclose what LLMs you use? It is open sourced, or is that something which is proprietary to you?
Yeah, I think every person every teams who are looking at their use cases, they need to evaluate all the foundational models.
Yes.
The medical LLMs that now we are experimenting is Google's.
Oh, okay.
And
you have a customer right there.
But we use, across the stack, we evaluate what is the right use case, and all of the foundational models are right now at par.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this. We will switch gears a little bit beyond data and trends. I know it's a very fascinating subject. But I want to switch gear a little bit to cross-border transactions, right? And all of us know this, right? I mean, India has been at the forefront of payments, right? Making a UPI transaction is just absolutely brain-dead activity. But that's not the same case with cross-border transactions. Each one of us in this room has gone through struggles on cross-border transactions, whether it be exchange rate or visibility or whether the payment is reached, and probably frauds are the highest and the MDRs are the highest because they increase frauds on these transactions, right? Now, my question is this a technology problem? Why are we not able to solve the cross-border problem as seamlessly as we are able to solve the domestic payments problem? Do you think it's a technology gap? Do you think it's a regulatory gap? Do you think it's a standards gap? Where are we on this?
So I think my take would be slight. I don't think it is a technology gap. I think given the advancement of how tech is today adopted and adapted, and the kind of competencies we have, it is not a tech issue. To me, I think every country is in various stages of evolution in terms of their payments, in terms of their tech infrastructure, in terms of their regulatory expectations, and in terms of the kind of, I would say, processes. Now, to do any kind of, say, let's take a payment, and then let's take a trade finance kind of a payment, which is the biggest cross-border, the heaviest. Your basic thing would be that what kind of AML checks you would need to do, what kinds of KYC transaction expectations you have, what kind of regulations are very specific to a country. Now, every country across the globe, when you sit back and look at it, and you take a maturity index of their technology adoption, you will find it very different across. Now, when you look at unification of this, I think this requires a kind of a standardization. Now, that standardization, especially for, now we have heard about blockchain, DLT, all of this coming in, but it has never taken off at a pace that is required. More because it has to be as a standard set framework. The understanding and the adoption of a standard framework to be included in your tech stack is easy. Then it becomes like a de facto adoption. Otherwise, every country is doing its own build, its own view. And probably the guy who takes the lead could probably be the main country. But I don't think that's, so the bottom line to me is, it's not a tech industry, it's not a tech issue. I think it requires some global body to really come in to say, these are the frameworks that we will use, one or two bodies who essentially work to make it say, this is the standards we set. In India, we have ABIC, which is essentially leading a lot on the DLT side. Now you have such CBDCs coming up pretty much right now. It is getting evolved pretty rapidly. But again, it is bespoke. You don't have framework standards. And every country is evolving. So to me, the cross-border transaction, to get a frictionless approach, in my view, it will take at least 2 to 3 years more. There will be a lot of
That's actually pretty good news. I actually didn't think it would be 2 to 3 years.
It will be 2, 3. It's starting. Its journey is already there. But to start imbibing that into various different use cases or transactional use cases will take there. Like for example, in trade finance, now you could very well say between India, US, Europe, it can happen in jiffy. But can it be done in Africa? Maybe it will take some time because some of these are ahead or behind. Some can leapfrog. So I think tech exists.
Yeah.
You have enough and more that is available. Once frameworks are set, especially for regulated entities.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, the payment happens through the regulated entity. Yes. And for a regulated entity, the trust factor, while DLT solves the trust factor, but it is about how these individual countries are going to have frameworks.
Yeah.
I think the evolution of the frameworks, evolution of regulatory expectations, and the very fact that if you are exchanging money through a particular process, you're going to get it back, or you're going to receive at the end. That kind of non-repudiation is going to be very, very, very good.
I'm going to go back to something that you said, and you sort of touched upon this and then bounced off it, which is decentralized finance and blockchain. The promise hasn't really played out. Probably 3 years ago, before all of us are now in this AI world, there was the DeFi world. Do you think that some of that is fundamentally going to change? I know this is a little bit different from the cross-border question. Any sort of quick thoughts around how DeFi will change?
It will change. I think my simple ask is it's already accelerating. It is accelerating. The only question is how you set up certain interactions from the regulatory frameworks. So anything that you exchange one to the other needs to have some set frameworks. Otherwise, you will have siloed. So which means bodies need to come together, which is happening. If you look at CBDC, is a classic example of how countries who are adopting it are starting to realize that it could be isolated, but how do you talk to each other? Now, that's all evolving pretty rapidly. In the next 1.5 years, you will see a very different approach.
I see.
Now, how your currencies are going to be, because there is a downside risk. The moment you do this and there is volatility of currency, it has the ability to completely suck out an economy. Yeah. So you have to be careful. There is a balance that you need to keep in, because the moment money flows out, and if there is a violent move on the currency, then it can create other effects. Yeah. So I think there are guardrails, there are going to be this, because I genuinely believe tech is never the issue. Yeah. It has to be what are the constraints, what are the risk frameworks you will put in play, because any money that you move has to be in the back of risk that is weighted across on it, and then it is done. Otherwise, it will be chaos.
I'm actually going to pick on two things, and maybe this is to all of you, but we will start with Navin. We talked about guardrails, we talked about risk. That's sort of what you referred to. I want to sort of pivot off that, right? Data is exploding, and we know that a lot of changes are happening, but we need to build the right guardrails, because then it becomes a very sort of loosey-goosey sort of system in which a lot of things can fail, risk starts escalating, right? And cyber security becomes a very important sort of concern. Google will definitely be at the forefront of cybersecurity as a concern. How do you view this in this new world? What sort of guardrails do you need to build? And once you've finished with it, Naveen, and either of you, if you can sort of weigh in as well, because this is building of guardrails in this new world is probably going to be the biggest thing that we need to do before we sort of throw ourselves open into the wild, wild west. So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
No, very true. And as Mahesh also said, even in cross-border, like there's a lot of education to be needed. The guardrails have to be there. That's very critical. So I would say that so first is we have to start with why we are collecting the data and for what purpose. To me, I'll just start and I'll not go in a lot of detail there, is where privacy becomes very critical. The user has the control. They have a visibility and transparency of why the data is collected, for what purpose. And organizations are filling that promise of what they are using it for. So that's the first part. I'll not go into a lot of detail. But the next part, which is very critical, is how do we secure it, right? And how we make sure that we are kind of providing a safe and secure platform to all our users. So I would say this is a three-pronged approach. The first is this topmost is user education, right? Whenever it comes to security and safety and fraud, right? Meaning there's no substitute for making sure the users are well educated by the pitfalls, and no matter how hard we do, it will always be a challenge. And certainly that boils down to in-app kind of notification, giving them gamified campaigns and learning opportunities for these. So that's one aspect of it. We also work on a lot of awareness campaigns, and I'll not go into a lot of those details. This is the first pillar of making sure that we have a secure system. The second part is the technology part, which is where I think we can build all the tools, capabilities, risk models, which we have been talking about. Now I touched upon some of these earlier, but a couple of things I want to talk in that context. One is when it comes to the whole network architecture and the underneath systems, we follow a very zero trust kind of system, which means that for every small thing, everybody is checked at every level, and the access is very limited. I think those are the very critical part of the system. The other is certainly you have to be on top of the game in terms of all the intrusion detection, spam, and various things happening in the world. The other aspect in security, which is kind of very critical, is lately the devices have become a very big target from scamsters and fraudsters to take a lot of information. So anything we are doing to keep data closer to the device, secure there, and just running, let's say, on-device LLMs is very critical. Anything on biometric, fingerprinting, tokenization, these are very critical to safeguard some of the critical data. So I would say, other than the LLMs, which I talked, like the other risk models and fraud detection model I talked about, these two areas are very critical. And the third area, which is, I think Mahesh touched upon it earlier, which is very critical, is see, in this ecosystem, fraudsters kind of have a certain modus operandi. They are blocked on a platform, they move to the next platform and start using it. So the collaboration across different entities in the ecosystem, the regulators, the different banks, different fintech is very critical to disseminate the information very quickly so that people can adapt. For example, we are working with I4C, and we are already kind of onboarded on their national crime portals, reporting portals, various government databases where frauds are reported, so that you can share information and also receive real-time information about many of these and interact and devise your model very quickly. So I think these are some of the strategies. We have to do multi-pronged approach, education of the user, better tools and technology, and third is a cross-team and cross-ecosystem collaboration.
I'm just going to be mindful of time here. And Saurabh, I know I offered we thought that we could have your views on this as well. But I have a different sort of topic, right? Are our jobs going to go away? What do you think? Do you see operational efficiencies kicking in at a very, very high level? And at what levels do you see automation kicking in your organization? And where do you think there is an actual upskilling needed? And where do you think, okay, there is a certain sort of runway that's available here for us to upskill and then get the folks to a different level? Do you see operational efficiencies kicking at a very different level now? Are you seeing it on ground in your organization?
Yeah. The way I would think about is that one, just building upon what I was sharing earlier, is that you would start seeing L1s and then subject matter experts. I think we are very close to get automation benefits when it comes to L1. And if you see how the current engineering systems are getting built around automation, one is for L1s, you don't need a lot of deep understanding of SOPs of your organizations or allowing for these technology to access a lot of internal toolings to give answers for L1. So you would start seeing the automation work happening on the L1 quite a lot. Actually, L1 had been happening for last decade as well, which is when you dial in a voice call center, you see press 1 for this, press 2 for this, right? So that is in the form of an L1, but now you have an opportunity to upgrade that experience of L1 by having a natural conversation to it. Two, three areas where Plum is, how we are looking at is when you look at sales efficiency, you look at marketing efficiency, and you look at customer support efficiency. So today, we have a lot of L1 work happening in the customer support already, where implementations of LLM that we have around Policy GPT is answering about 30% of our support queries.
I see.
It is routing for L2 support queries back to subject matter experts, and there we have like detailed SOPs, access to tools for our internal teams, especially there are right tools when you're doing support resolutions. So we'll wait for how the LLM becomes better in understanding, and this is what we're talking about, the agentic era, right? The agents who have autonomous control over some of your tools, including reads and writes access. And so we'll see how the agentic era matures, and they are able to take up the subject matter experts when it comes to customer support.
Have you actually seen this play out in the org, right? All of us have been talking about automation of customer service, agentic for a bit now.
Yeah.
Of course, it's early days still, but have you been able to attribute savings in the company directly to some of these activities? Is this happening on ground?
Yeah, like I said, in L1, 30% is already automated. Already automated.
This is real savings
this
that you're
is
seeing.
Having, and in order to do L2, we had to start a deep documentation exercise within an organization. So the organization right now is going into a documentation phase of writing the complete processes which both humans and machines can understand at the same time. So we are still about 6 months away from taking up some of the L2 work, but I definitely see support as a very soon getting disrupted with whatever we are seeing on the LLM side.
If you sort of extrapolate this, maybe 5 years down the line or something, do you believe like 70% of your org could be automated or something like that?
5 years is a too long time in this
Or it might be 90%.
There's a lot of disruption coming in 5 years' time.
I see. Yeah.
But in a couple of years, if you're saying 50% of support automation, it's very, very foreseeable.
Other than
more.
support and stuff, where do you think the next place we would touch?
Yeah, I'll give you an example on sales. So sales is all about input metrics and relationship building. So we would have all sorts of CRM implementation. Our sales teams would go and have conversations with the customers, but they would never come back and update the input metrics in Salesforce because that's painful. So there you are seeing already a lot of note-taking apps which are now graduating, and they are doing the input metrics inside our CRMs, where you don't have, you just focus on relationship building, let the input metrics come from the LLMs.
So customer
that's already
support,
happening.
CRM, sales, these are areas in which you see huge disruptions coming.
Sales are not going
Sales
to
is not going to go away, so sales guys, you're fine. The rest
But the pains of the sales people is
it's going to get better. Yeah. Obviously, all of us are going to upskill and do different things. So that's kind of obvious. I do want to be mindful of time here. We have 7 minutes. That's what I'm being told. I know audience probably has a lot of questions on their mind. We can take maybe 2-3 questions depending on time. If there's anyone who wants to ask a question, we'll definitely open it up. You can just raise your hand and we'll pass the mic around. Gentleman over there, yes, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sandeep. The question that I have is, everyone talks about large language models, and what was mentioned in the forum was, for different use cases, you could potentially use different kind of models, right? Now, I'd like to understand how would you build that into an enterprise application, and the follow-up question to that also is, what about small language models, right? Google has Gemma, for example, for edge computing. We don't hear conversations around, you can use large language models along with small language models for specific use cases. So if you could help me with that, please.
So maybe like Saurabh, if you want to start with the first part, which is embedding of special purpose LLMs. How do you think that play out? And maybe you can sort of add on to the small language models.
Sure. I think Sandeep, right? So the beginning is how well you can document. If you can, and the first principle access to look at here is that if you can tell a human how to do the work and give them the tools in their hand that they could execute, that's the first step. Whether you have a well-documented process and a tools which you are able to communicate to humans, the same way you should apply that to LLMs. Enterprises, of course, you have to be a little cautious about what information you want to let go and not. Particularly in our case, we redact PIIs before we communicate with LLMs. And you could take a call whether you want to build an in-house basis on privacy, etc., or security considerations that you want to do as well or not. But SOPs are the first steps.
Got it. And if you want to add on the small language
so I think what you raise is a very great question, especially like in a world when people are very worried about their data. I think it becomes very important that we keep it closer to the device. And that's why I think the nano versions of it, I think, are very critical, so that we are not transmitting unnecessarily data to the server, because we talked about the cybersecurity and various other things, so users are going to be wary about it. So I think it will be a combination, like if you can process on the device and just transmit only the relevant signals or anonymized data, which is completely taking care of PISP, I think it will make it a lot more safer. So I think that combination is very critical, I feel.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandeep. Do we have any other questions? Yes, gentleman over here.
Hello, this is Shiv Kumar. See, I'm from the legal sector, alternative dispute resolution. So what do you really feel about LLMs moving towards the alternative dispute resolution? I mean, resolving your disputes on the apps or on the site itself by using LLM. Where do India now moving towards with respect to the unicitral model?
Mahesh, if you want to take that.
I think in my mind, why not? The question is, it will happen. Because at the end of the day, an LLM should be able to, you could have specific, to the follow through from this, you could have specific which is trained on the kind of, I would say, in terms of outcomes that have been generated, and in terms of the kind of, I would say, what kind of court rulings that have come in against certain use cases. Now, I do believe it is possible, and it will happen.
It is possible in India. We have already started.
Yes.
And the United Nations has also framed the laws also. I would like to ask India, I mean, the Google is now in the payment platform, and insurance sector is there, and all the other fintech industries from cross-border investments and all those. There is a dispute. Without going to the legal part of it, the app or your LLM models, like you say, collecting data, and at the same time, you're using that data to answer the customer. And when the customer is having a dispute on that, do you have anything which can resolve it? Or Google is working on it? Because they are the pioneers in doing a lot of things. Are they working on it?
I think the explainability would be a big one.
And some of these things, I will just come to Navin's defense a little bit. He may or may not be able to talk about what Google is working on. So I will preface it with that.
There's one thing I just want to add, like today, like in dispute management, especially when it comes to UPI or payments, like the government already has, like we have come with UDIR and various frameworks where we are trying to just make sure that systems can talk in an open way to each other. LLM is probably the next step. We are even at a stage where the information is not easily available. And I think there are all the guardrails and being put there. I'm pretty sure the next level of evaluation will be, once all the information is available, how do you really make it much faster and easy using LLMs? To me, that's the next step in that. And especially when you're talking about merchant delivery and all that, you have to physically validate, or some invoice, something to validate it, right?
The move towards finalizing the outcome could be heavily influenced by the specific LLM. That could be possible. But finally, so which means that what you today in a case take, say 1 month or 2 months, could happen in a few hours. Yes. But the finality of it could be still subjective. But the data that could give you, that you could use to train and come out, could give far more better insights to the end user who's essentially trying to bring up a case or a dispute, saying that, no, if you have this, what can you do? Because this is what the training has really told it to do. And that use cases, I think, will come up very fast. The decisioning could still be data fact-based, and that's basis of the kind of laws that are prevailing.
Got it. I have
Thank
to be
you.
mindful of time, gentlemen. And we have about a minute, but thank you, Navin, thank you, Mahesh and Saurabh. It's just been fascinating here, all of you. I thank you. A round of applause for them, please. We talked about, I know AI and LLM is weighing very heavily on everyone's mind. We could clearly see that the questions are sort of also bubbling from there. We live in very interesting times. We have a lot of great stuff going on around FTX. We have booths where we're talking about a lot of this. I encourage all of you to sort of go there. And if some of these gentlemen are available for a few minutes after, maybe you can ask some questions as well, and hope you can sort of do that. But thank you so much for your time. I think we are at the top of the hour, so appreciate all of your time and presence here. Thank you.